Right, over the next few episodes we're going to be working on the front end of the bike. And in true payday projects fashion, we're going to do it a bit at a time. Now this week we're just going to do a bit of preparation and get one or two things out of the way so that when it comes to it the whole thing isn't such a big job. We're just going to bite bits off in small chunks. Now the bike's rectifier is perched right up front just underneath the headlamp between the two fork stanchions. It's an ugly piece of machinery and there's absolutely no need for it to be there. So we're going to relocate that to somewhere a little bit less obvious. Also the ignition. Triumph put it on the left hand side headlamp lug, which is one of the bike's period features. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a pain in the neck to use. The indicator's in the way and I found it quite awkward to get the key in and to operate the ignition switch. So we're going to use one of Motone Custom's relocation brackets and move it down onto the frame below the tank. Now Motone do offer several ignition switch relocation options and I'll go through those with you a little bit later on. Now I'm not going to harp on about the quality of these items that I'm using today. I think I've made my point in the previous episodes of this series. Motone custom parts are prestige parts and both the bits I'm using in this video are up to their usual standard. Now I chose the polished relocation bracket for the ignition and I didn't realise it at the time, but the polished only comes in the left hand version, they don't do a right hand version. Personally I would have preferred it on the right because I'm right-handed, but I wanted a polished one so I had to make do with the left-hand version. If you go for the black version, they do a right-handed and a left-hand version. Now it's CNC machined from 6061 T grade aluminium billet. It is surprisingly lightweight but very strong, and I would say strength-wise it's well over the top for the application that it's been used in here. Now to keep it clear of your radiator and your frame, it also comes with 2 lengthened stainless steel bolts, 2 aluminium spacers and 2 replacement screws for actually fastening the ignition switch to the relocation bracket because the original ones are going to be too long. It's a mirror finish and it's got the little Motone logo up at the top there. Now the first job to do is to take your headlamp front off to expose the wiring looms inside. Then when you've done that and made your headlamp lens safe, you should get away with just taking the right hand lug off depending on the length of the Allen keys you've got at your disposal. But if you find your Allen keys are too long, you might have to undo or at least loosen off the other side as well. Once you've unfastened the left hand lug, it should just swing right back out the way and expose the screws so you can unfasten the ignition lock. Once you've done that, offer it up approximately in place just to make sure that your loom for the ignition is long enough. Apparently there is some variation on all the looms on the Triumph Bonnevilles. It's not specific to model year or anything, it's hit and miss as to whether you get one that's long enough or whether you run into a problem. If you do find that it is too short, I'm sure you can return this kit to Motone. They do a centre mounted dash relocation bracket which, irrespective of the length of your loom, will work with every bike. Now at first, if it doesn't seem long enough, don't panic. There's usually 2 to 3 inches spare inside your headlamp bowl, and a little bit of careful rerouting of your loom will usually provide you with enough. 9 times out of 10 it'll be fine. So once you've established that you're not going to have a problem with the length of your wiring loom, it's time to get on with fitting it. Now you fit it with the wiring loom coming out of the ignition switch pointing upwards towards the headlamp. And your best bet is to fasten your ignition switch onto the relocation plate before going ahead with fitting it onto the bike. And you do that with the 2 shortened screws that Motone have provided in the kit. Then it's time to remove the 2 upper cradle bolts from the frame using an 8mm Allen key. Now again, there's a variation here. On mine there were 2 captive lugs on a plate that just fixed onto the back. I believe some of the later models, they are actually captive at the back, they're threaded at the back, so it doesn't have to be removed. It is actually quite surprising how much Triumph chopped and changed the way that they put these bikes together over the years. Now it's time to actually relocate your ignition by fastening that bracket onto the frame. You'll need your 2 lengthened bolts that come with the kit and the 2 aluminium spacers. Simply thread the bolt through the holes on the relocation bracket, then thread your aluminium spacers onto the bolt at the back of the relocation plate and then thread the bolt back into the frame and fasten it up. Now the torque measurement for this depends on the VIN number of your motorcycle. You'll need your Haynes manual for this. It's either 40 or 45 Newton meters, as I say, depending on the VIN number of your bike. Once that's done, this bit's finished. Just check by turning your steering from lock to lock that it doesn't get too tight and that everything's fine. You don't want to be putting any undue strain on the connectors for the ignition switch. Right, now we come to the rectifier relocation. Now, most people advocate leaving the plugs for the harness for the rectifier inside the headlamp bowl. And personally, I don't have a problem with that, providing you have enough wiring loom to accommodate it. Triumph have designed this to fit directly below the headlamp, so it stands to reason for me that they're not going to allow an awful lot lengthwise for the actual harness itself, because otherwise they're going to have a big coil of this coiled up inside the headlamp bowl. Now, I personally found that there wasn't enough length there to accommodate it inside the headlamp bowl, so I had to remove it. I'll show you how I did that. If you do it properly, you can make a really nice, neat, tidy job that can't be seen. And personally, for me, I think this is the best way of dealing with it. Well, first of all, you have to remove those two bolts that hold the rectifier onto the lower yoke of the bike, and I would recommend unplugging the rectifier inside the headlamp bowl and then pushing the plug back through the back of the bowl so that you've got it free, and do this with both the male and female parts of the plug. Now, your relocating bracket is basically a cross-shaped plate that's been cut from a high-grade aluminium and then black powder coated. On that plate you have 3 stainless steel studs threaded onto it, and they're accompanied with some nylon nuts and some spring washers. And fitting it is actually quite simple. I'll take you through it. Now, at the front of your frame there's a bracket that holds the horn on just above the oil cooler, and this is held in place with a single bolt. Simply take that bolt off and allow your horn to just dangle free for the moment, and then using the same bolt just loosely fasten your relocator in place, the operative word here being loosely. Now, at the back of the horn there is a nut that holds a little bracket on. You might need to loosen this nut off slightly so that you can spin the horn around so that you can comfortably accommodate the little wiring harness and the connectors so that you don't cause any damage to them when you fit it. I won't go through that with you because there are a couple of possible ways that you can do it, and that's probably down to personal preference, but you'll see what I mean when you actually get onto the job. There's nothing to it, and once you've lined it up how you want it, just tighten that nut back down again. Now, you should have the 2 horizontal studs facing towards the front of the bike, and there'll be one at the back. You simply fasten the horn with the factory bracket onto the back of the one below that, which points backwards towards the engine. Once you're happy with the positioning of everything, tighten the nut up that holds the bracket on, and you're ready to put your rectifier on. Now, before you put the rectifier on, just unclip your clutch cable, but replace the cable clip that holds it in place back onto the frame. Some people simply place it behind the relocation bracket, but that means it comes out at a very acute angle that's going to cause excessive abnormal wear, and I don't think that's good practice. I simply fastened it loosely back up to the original clip with a wide cable tie after this installation was completed, which ensured that it followed its original line without getting in the way or getting trapped in any way. Now, simply put your rectifier in place and fasten the nuts up, and that's that part of the installation finished. Now, the wiring loom for the rectifier will be hanging loose at the moment, and obviously it's open to the elements. I used a self-amalgamating tape to bind it and make it safe. Now, this stuff is as old as the hills. It has like a backing foil on it, but it's not adhesive. It's what's known as being self-vulcanizing silicone rubber. And holding it firmly in place as you wind it on, stretch it to fit as you wind it around your loom. And you need about a 50% overlap with each winding. Now, it is very stretchy stuff, and as I said, it's self-vulcanizing. What I did is I just cut some 6-inch strips, because if you're trying to dispense it from a roll in a tight space like this, it's going to be a nightmare. So I actually did this job in 3 parts. Make sure that you've got a good 2 or 3 inches either side of the plugs on the cabling covered, and then the actual plugs themselves are covered. This stuff is heat proof, fireproof and waterproof. It's used by both the aircraft and the marine industry, so it is the perfectly specified material for this job. And the great thing about it is, after a couple of days, the joins will start to sort of mould into each other, affording a safe, weather-tight seal. Now, it's like spaghetti junction behind that headlamp bowl anyway, with all the various wiring looms that come in and out of the headlamp. And just to tidy this little loom up, what I did was I secured one side up against the existing looms with a cable tidy so that it couldn't be seen, but still allowed plenty of freedom of movement as you turn the steering from lock to lock. And that's it, the job's a good one. Now, these two little modifications from Motone deal with two very common niggles with the Bonneville. And I think it stylishly tidies the front end up and makes way for the modifications that we have to come. I'll leave a link for both of these items from Motone, and I'll also leave a link to Amazon for the self-amalgamating tape that I use. It is one of those materials that any DIY mechanic should have in his toolkit, whether you are actually carrying out these modifications or not. Once again, thanks for watching what was part 10 of the Paydays project. I can't believe that we're halfway through already. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you found it useful. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back as usual on Friday, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.